and it's their intrinsic
nature. Now, this food basically robs
sound feasible, sound like.
Now, they told the people all that, and then they basically said, and by the way, God put us in power. He put us in charge. He gave us authority over everybody. Now, what you got to understand is they only had to get one generation to accept that. One generation. Once the first generation accepted by, whatever means they used, by force or what have you, then the next generation will basically be born into it. They will be born subject to, the powers that be, subject to the government. They will be born into it just like we was born into it. We was born, we grew up, and, we just walked around thinking that this is the way that it is. This is what we always knew. This is all we know. And we couldn't fathom that these people, the powers that be, came into power, fraudulently, that they scammed their way into the position that they have. We could never fathom that. Now, every politician knows that in order for you to get the vote, you have to tell the people what they want to hear. In order to get them on your side, you got to tell them what they want to hear. You know what they want. You got to say it. Now, they knew that the only way that they can get, all power, the only way they can get all the authority that they wanted was to create religion and to basically play on, the goodness and the guilt that exists in, all mankind. So now when we look at religion, what does religion do? Religion makes you the perfect citizen. It makes you soft. It makes you docile. It makes you more easy to control. So now if there is no rules, no laws, and you're starving, you're a big dude, much bigger than this guy over here who is sitting down with a bunch of food. You ask him for some of his food. He says no. What's keeping you from, bashing his head and taking his food? Absolutely nothing. It's survival of the fittest. It's nature. It is the law of self-preservation. Kill or be killed. Do what you must do to survive. Now, if it's you and 50 of your friends, and 3 guys come over there and say, hey, we put ourselves in charge of you. You have to follow our rules. You have to follow our laws. You have to do what we tell you to do. You guys will probably chase them away and end up beating them up. Now, what they have done was give the people hope, give them purpose, and say that the God who's going to honor your hope and honor your dreams, the God who put you here and gave you purpose, put us in charge. So now you got to get your head off of, America and the government structure that we have in America. You got to get your head off of that. Because when you start thinking about American government, you start thinking about, 1776, Declaration of Independence. That's how we got our government. That's how we got our laws. You start thinking about the founding fathers and saying, well, that's how we got our government. That's how we got our laws. It came from these guys. And that's not the case. Our government structure was set up long before the founding fathers was born, long before America was established. And how fitting that we look into the book of Romans, and we find in Romans, it's saying that God, it's saying that, I put these people in charge. The powers that be are ordained by me, so the government is in charge because God put them in charge. How fitting that it's the book of Romans that says that. When we go back and look at ancient Rome, our system of government today in America is set up exactly like ancient Rome. Now, in ancient Rome, we both had, 3 branches of government. We both had, a Roman Senate, you got a U.S. Senate. Rome had executive and legislative branches, just like the U.S. Both had written laws and codes. The Roman government could veto, just like we could veto. Rome had a social class, just like we have a social class. Rome had Capitol Hill, we have Capitol Hill. Rome had two councils that held the highest position in government. We have a president, we have a vice president. And, it's the same. The list goes on and on. This is something that you got to look at as suspect. When you go and you look at these things and you start to look at our government structure, we can see clearly, where it came from. So now there's no way we can look at, ancient Roman government, the whole structure, and look at our government structure today and say that, it's not the same in some ways. We got to look at that and see it for what it is. But it's weird that nobody connects the dots. Now, we look at that, we look in the book of Romans, and it's telling us that God wants us to obey authority and obey the government. Then, when we look at Hebrews 13:17, it says, obey them that have the rule over you, and submit yourself, for they watch for your souls, as they that must give account, that they may do it with joy and not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you. Now it's telling you, hey, obey them, be happy. If you act mad or sad, it's not going to be good for you. But, 1 Peter 2:13-15 says, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme. It says, submit yourself to every ordinance of man. Think about that. Or unto governors, as unto them that are sent by him, for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of them that do well. Or unto governors. Like, think about what it's saying here. We're talking about a government structure. We know government, when we hear governors, most people who don't read the Bible wouldn't fathom that word being in there. And this is from, King James Version. So I was talking about governors. We know in our system of government, we have governors. It goes on to say, for so is the will of God, that with well-doing ye may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. So it's telling you to basically obey these governors, obey your king, obey, this whole government structure. Now, as I've said before, and as I've read before, we know we get our judicial court system from the book of Ezra. Now, when we go to Ezra 7:11, it says, now this is the copy of the letter that the king Artaxerxes gave unto Ezra the priest, the scribe, even a scribe of the words of the commandments of the Lord and of his statutes to Israel. And thou, Ezra, after the wisdom of thy God that is in thine hand, set magistrates and judges, which may judge all the people that are beyond the river, all such as know the law of thy God, and teach ye them that know them not. And whosoever will not do the law of thy God, and the law of the king, let judgment be executed speedily upon him, whether it be unto death, or to banishment, or to confiscation of goods, or to imprisonment. Now, again, when you read that, this is where we clearly get our court system from. The Bible tells you to pay taxes. It's telling you that you're going to face consequences for not obeying the law. It's telling you that you'll be put to death. Everything that we see in our government system today, our structure, you read in the Bible, it's telling you to obey governors, to obey this, obey that. When we look at all this stuff, on the surface, you can say that, what's wrong with that? It's all well and good. We can't have a society without rules, without laws, without, a structure. We all know that. But we can't look at our government structure today. We see how corrupt it is. And here you have the Bible telling you that God put this here. But these people are clearly evil and corrupt. So how are we accepting it? So the whole point is you have to look at this from a different way and say, well, wait a minute. This whole thing is one big scam What we have is people who created this mess to give validity to the power that they wanted to have over us. And that's exactly what has taken place. So a lot of people have no clue that when they look into the Bible, when they start reading in Ezra, that the whole law structure, the government structure that we have today is sitting right there in the Bible. This is why you put your hand on the Bible in court when you swear in and everything like that. This is why when you go to almost every single courthouse, a lot of people don't know this either. Go to the courthouse, you will almost at every courthouse find a copy of the Ten Commandments. You'll find a plaque somewhere. A lot of people, when they go to court, they don't look around, on the grounds. You just go to court, you handle business. But look around. I mean, look on the wall, look for a plaque. It's usually always a plaque of the Ten Commandments at every courthouse. Now, I know some courthouses, outlawed it or took them down in some places. And in most cases, you'll still find that plaque of the Ten Commandments at a lot of the courthouses. See, what happened was when they first tried to, start instilling these laws, it was about, God wants you to do this. God says that. God says obey that. Then once they got the people to accept their authority and accept them as the powers that be, it went from, well, God told us to do this. God told us to do that. God wants us to tell you to do this. And then, once they gained control and got control over the people, then that slowly changed. It shifted from, it being about God's law to it being about the government's law. And they slowly separated the two, but they both the same. But they slowly separated, and over time, you had God's law over here, you had the government's law, when they really one and the same. But since they know that this whole God's law is a scam to give validity to their law, the government's law, they pushed it to the side. Now you separate church and state. You take the Bible from out of school. And now you have what they really wanted in the first place, which is, government control and government law. And now, as you can see when you watch TV, when you start looking around, you can see the government basically distance themselves from, anything that has to do with the Bible, because they have to if they're going to get away with the sick things that they have been getting away with. So since knowledge has increased and information has increased, they can't just simply bring a person to court and say that, well, you broke God's law. You would say, what God? And every man has a right to face his accuser, and God is not talking. God is not going to come to court and say, yeah, you broke my law. So they had to basically get us from under God's law and put us under, government law, under their jurisdiction. Now, for anybody who know about the straw man, we know it's basically two of us. You have the real flesh and blood you, and you have the corporate fiction created to basically get benefits or reap benefits from things that you do on a corporate level or on a business level. So the government is getting benefits from your straw man. Now, God is basically the government straw man. God is a fiction made up by the government so they can reap benefits. So the government is getting benefits from our straw man and from their own straw man, which is God. But we know, of course, it's much bigger and deeper than that. But when you look at it that way, it's basically the same thing. Government has a straw man just like we do, and they're getting all the benefits from theirs and ours as well. Now, another reason why the government has to separate itself from, the Bible, it's because it has to fulfill Bible prophecy. And we know most of the prophecies in the Bible has to deal, with government. Now, forget about all the prophecies that take place or that is fulfilled within the Bible itself, because, there's no way to prove those prophecies, are real or came true. Forget the prophecies that deal with blood moons or, that deals with any kind of, celestial events and things like that. Forget those prophecies. Blood moons and stuff like that are things that have been happening long before the Bible was written. So we can forget those. Now, what we are left with is prophecies that has been fulfilled by man or governments, mostly governments. So we're talking about Israel becoming a nation, government. Now, when you look at America now, they are basically fulfilling the prophecy of Isaiah 17:1, which is basically saying that, Damascus will no longer be a city, but a heap of ruins. And Damascus is in Syria, and it's been, bombed lately by Russia and government. But again, this is governments. This is man fulfilling Bible prophecy. And this is what you got to understand. It's not something, magical that's coming true out of thin air. This is something that man is making come true to fulfill Bible prophecy. So by them separating themselves from the Bible, it makes it look like this is something that's happening on its own and not them trying to fulfill Bible prophecy. Now, anybody with any common sense can see that if the Bible is real, or the God of the Bible, is real, there's no way in the world he would put these governments in charge. There's no way he would make them, the powers that be or the authority figure over us representing, the God of the Bible. Because, before, during, and after Rome was going around preaching the Bible and trying to make people become Christians, they were breaking every single law in the Bible. They was raping and killing and murdering men, women, and children. They were doing everything against that Bible. So why would God turn around and put them in power when they are clearly breaking his law? It says in Romans that they will not be a terror to good, but unto evil. So how are they going to be a terror to evil when they themselves are doing evil? And I've heard people say that, the government is evil and they work for Satan and, they have nothing to do with the God of the Bible. But the government gives churches 501c3 tax exempt status. They do everything they can to keep churches open and going up, in the communities. So when you look at these 501c3s, you see that it's basically saying that, the government owns the church and they can use the church basically for whatever they need to use it for. But you have to realize that, of course, the government has to separate itself from religion because of the sick things that they have to do. You can't be walking around preaching Christianity and stuff like that and then, bombing kids, letting people starve to death, letting these cops go out here and shoot people up. So they have to walk that fine line. They only really use religion when it benefits them. Now, if the government came out and said that, we are basically anti-Christ, we don't follow God, we don't follow the Bible, then, religious people will go crazy. They would flip out. But you have the FCC, you have the government allowing TV shows like Family Guy and The Simpsons to basically make a mockery of God, and Jesus. So it begs the question, what's going on? A lot of people don't look at this stuff and say, well, if this government is supposed to be put here by God, why are they, blaspheming or, trying to destroy the image of God? And you look at the FCC and they allow, the government, they allow Hollywood to basically promote Satan. In movies, they promote them all the time. You look at Fox, they got a new show coming out called Lucifer. CBS got a show called Angel from Hell. But when you look on the money, it says, "In God we trust." What God? What God? I mean, you let all these things happen that go against the Bible and go against God, but the money says, "In God we trust." This is supposed to be a government instrument. It says, "In God we trust." What God? Their God, because they are God. And that is what you have to understand is taking place here. They know, bottom line, when you look at who is taking the role of the God in the Bible on this earth and, the real world, it is them. It is basically them. So when we start looking at the role that the government plays and comparing it to the role that God plays in the Bible, we can see that the government has basically taken the role of God in the Bible. So you start doing the comparison. God, he gives us laws and rules. the government gives us laws and rules as well. God wants us to be obedient. The government wants us to be obedient. God sends people into battle. He sends them into war to conquer lands that he say is evil. Our government sends troops, sends our soldiers into countries to fight against this whole war on terror against people they say are evil. So we have to examine this. We have to ask these questions like, when you start looking in the Bible, you see that, God destroys a lot of things. He sends angels to Sodom and Gomorrah. He eventually destroys Sodom and Gomorrah. He destroys the whole world except for, Noah and his family. God kills a lot of people, or he sends angels to kill a lot of people in the Bible. So, when you read Deuteronomy 20, when God is basically saying to the Israelites that I've given you this land as an inheritance, all you have to do is kill everybody here, leave nobody alive, and the land is yours. So that's like me bragging about all the money I have. Then I take you to a car dealership and say, hey, that car is yours. All you got to do is kill everybody in here. You would basically say that, once you use that money that you got to buy the car. So when we read these verses in the Bible, when we see what it's saying, a lot of people don't put two and two together and see that, something is wrong. Something doesn't add up when God can just go down there or send angels down there to take the land from the people peacefully. So when you read the Bible, the whole thing is God's supposed to want us all to be Christians, or not to be Christians, I shouldn't say that, to be obedient, or to eventually, end up in heaven. So, why would God create these people if God's supposed to be the creator? Why would he create these people to have them destroy, a week later or days later? It could have been babies in that town that was just born, 2 days later. Why would God create them if he knew he was going to send the Israelites there to just wipe them out? So, things to think about. Same thing with the government. We are told that these people are supposed to be evil. And instead of some kind of diplomatic solution, we bomb places. And we just accept it in the Bible, and we accept it in real life. So we have to start looking at things, and people always say that the government is getting too big. And we have to really zoom in on everything that the Bible tells us that God gave us dominion over. And we'll see that the government has slowly taken that away from us. In Genesis, God gives man dominion over the animals, over the air, stuff like that. We can see that the government is coming in there and regulating these things. The government is saying that, well, you can't touch these animals, or you can't hunt these animals. You can't do this. Well, you can't collect rainwater. What the hell is that? Can't collect rainwater. I mean, it's crazy. Pay attention to the laws that are being passed that's taking away the freedom from the people. Freedoms that the Bible says God has given us. Everything is being taken away. The government controls our education, controls our food, controls us. And we are supposed to be free people in this free country, when we don't realize that we are being controlled by a government who has managed to make us think that we are free, and we really not. I mean, what is freedom? What is freedom really? I mean, if you are in a system where you have to follow a rule, or you have to follow a law that is not something, simple as, don't kill and don't steal, then you basically not free. You are at the mercy of the powers that be, because as soon as you break that law, they will be the ones who come in and, and stop you and put you in your place. And this is basically what has taken place. Now, and it's hard for people to see because they separate the two. They separate church, they separate government, and they see the government as being this thing that was here, that was created by us to basically govern us. But then they look to the Bible and they see that, well, God basically did the same thing and gave us these rules that we are supposed to follow morally, and that we are supposed to, obey because, we want to be good people. We want to get into heaven. And then you have to realize that that same book is saying that we are subject to the jurisdiction of the government, or subject to the government. And it's weird how religious people complain a lot about the government. They complain about things that the government do, when the Bible is clearly saying that the powers that be, have been ordained by God. Now, you can read that, and some people can say that, well, maybe the Bible was referring to the government structure, way back then, during the time of Christ. Or maybe the Bible was speaking to, the Hebrews. A lot of those verses are in Hebrews, and it's in relation to the Hebrews accepting the rule of the Romans. But when we look at all this stuff, we can't really say that. We got to pertain it to us today, because these laws still exist today. We still follow Ezra. We still follow the Ten Commandments. We still follow a government structure that says that they have been put in power, by God himself. So it should be obvious for people to see that this religion was created to make the perfect docile citizen, to make a person that will be subject to the jurisdiction or subject to the laws of this government. And the religion was created to give validity to the laws of this government structure, to the laws of these people or these authorities who wanted to take control of us. The book tells you to turn the other cheek, to love your enemy, love your neighbor, and, stuff like that. It tells you to pay taxes, to obey government officials, whether elected or not, pray for your government. It tells you to do all kinds of things that's highly suspect when you realize that, there's no proof to back up this Bible. So we are basically taking the word of the book. Never does the government come out and say that, well, God put us in charge. At some point in the beginning, before we was born, they had to have said that. And like I said, once they got the first generation to accept it, everybody else just, rolled into place, and it was born into it. And the Bible also tells you that it will be hard for you to get into heaven if you are rich. It will be easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it will be for a rich person to enter into the kingdom of heaven. So it's basically saying that they don't want you to be rich. You got to think about that. Poor person is more easy to control because you need hope, you need that religion. So the Bible working on you, for the Bible to work, it relies on you to be in poverty and to be poor, which is why, most of the people on the planet is living in poverty, or, is in some kind of poor state. They live in squalor and hovels, and people living in huts, and people all across the world are mostly poor and relying on a God or relying on a government. And this whole structure was set up that way. And the people who have money, as we can see, are in cahoots with the people in power. And this is what we see. We see the actors and the actresses and people who are millionaires all within this whole, 1%, this one structure. And in order for you to get into this point, unless you win a lottery or something like that, you have to be down. You can be rich and have all this money, but as long as you stay to yourself and spend your money and don't try to do anything big, they won't bother you. But as soon as you try to make some noise or do anything that's going to appeal to the masses of people, you have to either join them or they'll get rid of you. And that's basically how it goes. So when you start looking around, you can see this power structure that's really centered around a government structure, because really at the forefront, when you look at it, the government is running all these things. We look at, like I was saying before, the FCC and all of these federally controlled things that deals with, either Hollywood or the music industry or, large quantities of people, like the DMV and, the police force. All this stuff is all falling under a government structure that they control. If you're not with them, then either you're a citizen or you're against them. And as we have seen over history, over time, the bad guy always wins, and they are the bad guy. So you have to realize that, when you step back and you take a look at this whole picture. Now, I've done a lot of videos on, religion. And this is something I wanted to touch on a little bit more because a lot of people had that question. Like, when you really start to look at it, the government really does, take a lot of power away from the people, and they really do take on that role of God when you start, paying attention and taking a look at the power of God in the Bible and the power of this whole government structure. So now, I want you to take a look at this video because, Khalid Muhammad basically sums it up, when he's talking about God and, what took place. Take a look.
No mystery God. Absolutely no mystery God. There is no God in the sky and there is no devil under the ground. Heaven is not in the sky and hell is not under the ground. Heaven and hell are conditions of the mind, states of existence and states of being. And so Jesus told us to stop looking for heaven in the sky. He said the kingdom of heaven is within you. And that we are the temples of the living God. That the living God lives in our temple, and he does not inhabit the sky, but he inhabits the higher realms of the heavens, of the realm of the secret innermost chambers of the subconscious chamber of the soul of man and woman. And this power bursts forth and emanates forth from him to set in motion a universal order based on principle and law. All of this set in motion by a divine power and a divine force that never dies. It's constant. It just changes forms. God is in man. Can't be in any man. He's got to be in the original man. Because if God is the first and everything comes from him, then he can't wait for anything else. He brings everything else into existence. There could be no white man if there were no black man. It is biologically and genetically impossible for the recessive white man to produce the dominant yellow baby. Biologically and genetically impossible for the recessive yellow man and woman to produce the dominant brown baby. And biologically and genetically impossible for the recessive brown man and woman to produce the dominant black baby. But that black man and his woman, the father and the mother of it all, can produce black, can produce brown, can produce red, can produce yellow. And if the seed runs wild or mutates in the womb of the black woman, can even produce an albino, something which is whiter than white, 180 degrees in either direction.
Now, as I have maintained and always said, the Bible is coded. Now, you can sit back and you can ponder on why would they put the code, or why would they code the book if they didn't want us to get it? Why would they give us the book if they didn't want us to understand what's in it? I mean, it's too much to explain. I have a lot of videos on, Christianity and the Bible, as I've said. But when you understand what that book is saying and the code that's in it, you can, it's basically telling you what I'm saying here. I mean, you can put it together. I mean, for anybody who has or who is currently doing research, I mean, you can see from what I'm talking about in this video that this stuff adds up, it matches, and, of course, there's other things that we can pull out of the Bible that fits in other different areas. As I said, the Bible is a book of codes, and it just goes in so many different places, and you can put it with so many different subjects, and, that's by design. But bottom line, this is what the book was created for. Firstly, to get control of the masses of people out there and to get them, sucked into this book. And that's what happened. I mean, look at the way people act when it comes to the Bible and religion. Like, look at the stuff that people do and the stuff they say. So this Bible clearly, the book clearly has a hold on the masses of people around the world. And obedience in God, it's obedience to the government. And that's a fact, whether you want to accept it or not. This is all about their control and their rule. And we have no choice but to accept it. And I think that a lot of people realize that mentally, and they realize that how futile it is to actually go against this whole big government. A lot of people think it's like impossible. So to cope with it, they just accept it. A lot of people just give in and accept what is basically like, you know, slavery, or basically like, you know, us being hostages in this whole government structure. And unless we wake up and realize that we are really actually hostages under this whole government control that is disguised, you know, by religion and all these laws and rules and stuff that we don't really have to abide by at all. I mean, what is it really? People look at a contract and a piece of paper and think that that somehow binds your soul and everything that you are, you know, to a contract or to a paper. And it's really nothing if we get together and decide that it's nothing. We don't have to accept this government control. We don't have to accept their power. We should expose it every chance we get. And that's the only way we're going to ever be free. Now, this is my video. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next video.